Hello and welcome to China Now. My name is Makiza Latifa. We begin with China Currents, where we bring you the key stories shaping China's economy, technology, and global engagement this week. So, the United States has officially approved Nvidia's export of high-end artificial intelligence chips to China. Now, though under strict conditions, marking a new phase in the evolving technology relationship between Washington and Beijing. A seemingly ordinary glass bottle publicly praised by senior Chinese officials is quietly reshaping the semiconductor landscape between China and Japan. And despite growing rhetoric around decoupling and containment, China's total import and exports reached a record high in 2025, underscoring the resilience of its trade ties with the world. These and many more stories are coming up here on China Currents. Let's get started.
Welcome to China Currents. In this episode, the United States has officially approved Nvidia's export of high-end artificial intelligence chips to China, but under strict conditions. China's breakthrough at a glass bottle is quietly reshaping the semiconductor game between China and Japan. Despite growing rhetoric around decoupling and containment, China's total imports and exports hit a record high in 2025. China's year-end statistics reveal 5% GDP growth, while a diminishing population raises concerns. And Chinese netizens collectively mourn the passing of a Xinjiang official. Now let's begin today's China Currents. On January 13th local time, the Trump administration officially approved Nvidia's export of its H200 artificial intelligence chip to China. This chip is 6 times more powerful than the H20, the downgraded AI chip that Nvidia has so far been allowed to sell to China, and this decision marks a rare easing of export restrictions on this specific product, following years of continuous tightening of chip controls on China from the Biden administration through the Trump administration. That said, judging the condition issued by the US Department of Commerce, Nvidia still faces a high threshold to export the H200. For example, export volumes must not exceed roughly 50% of Nvidia's domestic US sales, and Chinese buyers must pledge not to use the chips for military purposes. Nvidia must ensure priority supply for US customers. In addition, Bloomberg reports that based on President Trump's previous statements, the US government may demand a 25% revenue share from sales of advanced AI chips to China. But the reality is, if export restrictions are not relaxed in time, China may not need Nvidia's products at all in the future. David Sachs, the White House's AI and crypto policy lead, previously admitted to Bloomberg that China, in its pursuit of semiconductor self-reliance, had already declined US H200 chips. Chinese companies are now actively pushing forward domestically produced AI chips that could replace Nvidia's products. For example, Huawei unveiled a 3-year roadmap for its Ascend AI chips last September. And meanwhile, internet giants such as Alibaba, Tencent, Baidu, and ByteDance have significantly increased investment in chips and R&D and design, aiming to gain greater autonomy and control of their supply chains. Next, we turn to an industrial contest between China and Japan, centered on a seemingly insignificant glass bottle. On January 12, Li Lecheng, Party Secretary and Minister of China's Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, revealed in an interview that China can now independently manufacture specialized glass containers for photoresists, explicitly stating that this is one of the country's major national science and technology breakthroughs. More importantly, the product has already completed production line trials with positive feedback. Photoresist is often referred to as the blood of the semiconductor industry. However, its storage, transportation, and use are inseparable from a viable container. As manufacturing processes advance to 7 nanometer, 5 nanometer, and more advanced nodes, even nanometer-level particle contamination or trace amounts of metal ions leaching from glass containers can cause catastrophic yield losses across an entire wafer. For a long time, the technology for manufacturing photoresist containers has been firmly controlled by Japanese companies. Over decades, Japan leveraged its dominance in photoresist formulations to build a highly closed and deeply bundled supply system. In practice, Japanese suppliers often require customers to purchase photoresists together with designated containers, When Chinese photoresist manufacturers attempted to purchase compliant containers separately, Japanese suppliers repeatedly refused. The result was that even when China succeeded in developing its own photoresists, the lack of qualified containers prevented them from leaving the laboratory, from being tested on production equipment, and from gaining recognition from wafer fabs. For foundries such as SMIC or TSMC, no one is willing to risk pouring materials stored in unverified containers into lithography equipment with hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, China's successful development of photoresist glass containers means a significant reduction in Japan's bargaining power in this field, one of the few areas when Japan has long maintained near-absolute monopoly advantages over China. Next, China has released its 2025 trade figures, which are truly striking. China's General Administration of Customs recently announced that in 2025, China's total goods trade exceeded 45 trillion yuan. China not only retained its position as the world's largest trading nation in goods, but also reached a historic high in scale. Looking at the breakdown, trade with Belt and Road partner countries reached 23.6 trillion yuan, growing 6.3% and accounting for 51.9% of total trade. Trade with ASEAN, Latin America, and Africa reached 7.55 trillion yuan, 3.93 trillion yuan, and 2.49 trillion yuan, respectively, growing by 8%, 6.5%, and 18.4%. Lu Zhe, chief economist at Suzhou Securities, noted that data from November 2025 shows China's trade surplus with US and Europe had fallen to 23.9%, when the share accounted for by Belt and Road partner countries rose to 43.6%, roughly double that of the US and Europe combined. This serves as a confidence boost for China amid tariff retaliation and disputes such as TikTok's ownership. From the perspective of export composition, China's high-tech products exports reached 5.25 trillion yuan, up 13.2%. Exports of electric vehicles, lithium batteries, and solar products surged by 27.1%, while green products such as wind turbines saw growth as high as 48.7%. Experts noted that China's export structure has undergone a significant shift from labor-intensive to technology-intensive products. In 2018, processing trade accounted for as much as 93% of China's exports. By October 2025, this figure has fallen sharply to 23.7%, significantly reducing the impact of US-China tariffs on employment and corporate profits. Beyond these geopolitically charged figures, another set of recent statistics offer a clearer view of China's domestic situation. First is GDP. According to China's National Bureau of Statistics, China's GDP reached 140 trillion yuan in 2025, growing at 5.0% year-on-year at constant prices. This figure was later affirmed by the IMF, which also raised its forecast for China's economic growth in 2026. The second figure is electricity consumption. On January 17th, China's National Energy Administration reported that total electricity consumption in 2025 reached 10.37 trillion kilowatt-hours, up 5.0% year-on-year. This marks the first time any single country has surpassed 10 trillion kilowatt-hours. Notably, industrial electricity accounted for about two-thirds of total usage, while electricity consumption for EV charging and battery swapping surged by 48.8%. However, alongside these strong growth indicators, China's population data shows a clear decline. By the end of 2025, China's population stood at 1.40489 billion, down 3.39 million from the previous year. Births totaled 7.92 million, while deaths reached 11.31 million, resulting in a natural population growth rate of minus 2.41 per thousand. This is generally believed that when natural population growth rate fall below minus 2 per thousand, a society has entered a clear stage of demographic contraction with mounting structural pressure. Next, let's learn a story of a widely mourned figure in China, He Jiaolong, who recently passed away unexpectedly. He Jiaolong, an official from the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, passed away last week after falling from a horse while filming her hometown to showcase its local appeal. She had over 6 million followers on China's TikTok equivalent platform Douyin. Her death prompted many Chinese netizens, even those unfamiliar with her, to leave messages of condolence. Only 47 years old, He Jiaolong had long worked in Jiangsu County in Yili, Xinjiang, a region known for horses. In 2017, she became deputy head of Jiangsu County, and she gained popularity after releasing a video of herself riding through snow-covered landscapes to promote local tourism. Over time, she became a symbol of Xinjiang's winter charm. She later devoted herself fully to social media content creation, leveraging short videos and live streaming to promote Xinjiang's agricultural products and tourism. She helped more than 400 agricultural enterprises complete e-commerce upgrades, hosted over 500 live stream sales events, and generated more than 600 million yuan in sales. The public brand she helped build, Taste of Xinjiang, established 8 live streaming bases across the region. After 3 years, total direct and indirect sales driven by the brand exceeded 20 billion yuan. After news of her death confirmed, netizens returned to the horseback video that first made her famous, leaving messages of mourning. The video has now received over 1.08 million likes, with comments filled with virtual flowers and calls for the platform not to remove her account. Many also pledged to continue purchasing Xinjiang products in her memory. And that's all for today. See you next time.
And that's all for China Currents. Let's now turn to the Thinkers Forum, where we take a deeper look at the issues shaping China's relations with the world. In this edition, we bring you an interview with Professor Shen of the Fudan University, who shares his insights on the Taiwan issue and its implications for regional stability and cross-strait relations. Stay with us for more details.
Sometime the end of December, the German Marshall Fund of the United States released a report analyzing the impact on China's economic, social, and international costs should Beijing attack Taiwan. Now, the conclusion is that it's going to lead to catastrophic consequences for mainland China, that is, and particularly in the case of a major war, leading to massive military defeat, personnel losses, economic losses, and social unrest. But all of these rests on several assumptions. One, it is assuming that the United States will surely intervene with full force. And second, there will be global economic and diplomatic blockades against China. And third, it is assuming that the Chinese military has absolutely no winning case against US military intervention. Tell us more about it.
This report is a very interesting examples to tell us 3 important truths. The first, it tells that intervention on the Taiwan issues and arms sales to Taiwan issue, arms sales to Taiwan Island, especially the United States arms sales to Taiwan, is nothing but more than a business. This report is an advertisement, and one of the most active accounts that transfer this English report in the world social media is named like Taiwan Defense or something like that. It's the account run by U.S. chambers to Taiwan, and the main duty is to sell arms to Taiwan. So it's a kind of advertisement because this report tells only one story. If Taiwan buy enough weapons and the technologies from United States, and then more they have the possibility to win, to conquer, or to counter back, or something like that. And the second, say that Bonnie Glaser is a very interesting female researcher. She is quite senior research fellows. I met her in year 2008 to 2009 when I have stayed in the United States, Georgetown University, for 1 year postdoctoral research fellow there. This guy is very interesting. If you met during the face-to-face dialogue with her, you will find that she's her recognitions and her narrative framework to China is classically located and locked in the 1980s, in which that United States enjoy an overwhelming advance rate to China. The third, I have to say that still the report is so stupid, and sometimes it's very dangerous, especially the military part of that report.
Yeah.
The author of the military part of that report just duplicate his older research, which has been published about several years ago. So you'll find it's very interesting that the parade of September 3rd never happened. So the military's new power and the new capacities never exist. They write that part, the military part of the report, mainly based on their fiction. It's just like a fiction novels. They
Yeah.
believe China is still weak. China still don't have those advanced militaries, and the Taiwan still had the possibilities. They have the possibilities to win. So I think that maybe not least, the conclusion is the most pathetic is maybe this is the most important serious feedback from the collaborations between those guys inside the Taiwan Islands who critically or eagerly looking for so-called independence, and their foreign brokers represented by Bonnie Glaser, they just buy a report, and this report, which has a very low quantities, some people wish that this report were providing more so-called confidence, can launch effective countering back to the latest 2025 justice mission military drills along the island.
Yeah.
The most ironic part is if you make a research, one of the most serious research of this report come from in the Taiwan island. As Taiwan islands inside that island, the military analysis take a very serious research on the report and say that this report definitely cannot have enough evidence to support its main conclusions. Some military analysis inside Taiwan, they take the most objective attitude to analyze this report and
Mm.
refuse to accept the conclusion. So
Yeah.
it's a very typical uh, inside island propaganda,
Right.
triggered or favored by those independents themselves. They
Right.
buy a report to prove that they are brave enough, they still have the capacity
Mm.
to countering the military balance between the mainland and the island,
Mm.
even in today's
Right.
world.
What should we read into the 10-hour long live firing drill that Beijing carried out in the early times of the new year?
These 2 days drills, one day is don't with the live fires, the second
Okay.
day has the 10 hours live fire drills. This drill is very important signals to tell the world actually Beijing is prepared. We can launch a surprising startup at any time, and
Mm.
it will take no longer than 15 or 18 hours. We can
Mm.
control the airspace, the sea, and the cyberspace alongside the Taiwan island and make an effective block to the whole island. The
Mm.
first. And the second, we have the capacities to launch a very effective and a precise access deny, area deny strategies uh, nearby the island, which means your air carrier battle groups cannot enter in these areas because we have this very precise and fatal long range capacities to launch effective deterrence. And the third, we launch a joint precise strike entering Hamas, the one of the most important Taiwan United States military cell, which trigger these drills, the Hamas rocket systems. In the televisions produced in CCTV, we have a video clip that the PLA soldiers say that we got the Hamas target information and then launch countering fires. And after that, the rocket files, the Air Force, the Naval Force, the launch joint programs to produce precise destroy of Hamas in the middle part of Taiwan Island. It's sending a very clear signals that any Hamas which has been transported into Taiwan Island will be destroyed first timely if we launch these actions. And the fourth, it's the first time we're providing a picture. This picture is produced by a highly advanced military used huge UAV, the unmanned vehicles, the military drones. We we captured the Taipei, the skyscrapers, but the point is not the skyscrapers, but is the two buildings just on the different side of the skyscrapers. The one is the military head command and control headquarters of so-called Taiwan military troops, the Yuanshan Command Center. And the other part is Lai Ching-de's office, the Boai Techu, the so-called president buildings. All these headquarters, which the one the political going on, you have been dead, you have been destroyed. The first. And the second is it's the first time the J-20, our stealth fighters, entered Taiwan so-called territorial airspace and providing the evidence. We're providing you the pictures. All these pictures proved that your airspace, your airbase will be destroyed when we launch these actions. And the fourth or the fifth, it's the first time we launched military operations and which de facto close the naval and airspace of Taiwan Island for 10 hours. We just cut it off. We prove that we have the capacity to launch a very effective, highly efficient, highly sophisticated blockade of the total island. We can cut off the supply chains. We can cut off the import and export of Taiwan Island. We can cut off and make its mission impossible for people like Lai Ching-de flee out of the island, no matter by any kind of means, either by the air, by the sea, or the submarines, or you will be hunted and destroyed. So this live fire drills providing very clear signals. The PLA are prepared, but during that time, we still keep the door of peaceful reunification open, and the choice is at the Taiwan side.
Right, let's still stay a bit further on the Thinkers Forum, but this time around, we bring you an interview with Professor Catherine Liu of the University of California, Irvine. She shares her perspective on the situation in Venezuela and reflects on the political legacy and global implications of US President Donald Trump's actions.
I think that what happened in Venezuela is really a process, part of a process that the Trump administration has inaugurated, which is really the destruction of any kind of liberal hegemony in the world and in the United States. And under liberalism, we believe that we should respect the sovereignty of other nations. Under liberalism, we believe that there's such a thing as international law. Under liberalism, we believe that in the United States, we believe that Congress is the only unit that has the right to declare war and authorize military action. All of these things have been undermined throughout the years with Bush 1, Bush 2, Obama initiating military action across the world that comes from the president's office that doesn't have approval of any other legislative body. And this is finally, the real culmination of that deterioration of checks and powers. The American executive branch now is a war branch. And, there have been many Chinese analysts who have been very realistic about saying that what we've entered is a period of time in which the sovereignty of nations is completely overthrown for the interests of the United States. And the interests of the United States have to do with, at least under this administration, the Monroe Doctrine, where any kind of foreign interference in the Western Hemisphere deserves American U.S. military show of strength to expel that foreign influence. And a lot of the coverage in the United States is saying the foreign influence in Venezuela is China. So China's influence has to be stopped. The Chinese were meeting with Maduro in the morning before he was kidnapped. In the great war of interest, in this sort of chaotic, I would say post-liberal chaos, shows of strength are how the U.S. is going to protect its interests. And on my Substack, I've talked a lot about gangster capitalism and how the gangster in the United States imaginary used to be this marginal figure who was trying to make money so that he could belong to the wealthy and the elites. Well, now what we've had is that this mythic folk hero has become the most powerful figure in the United States, Donald Trump. We're in the phase of what Matt Huber called gangster imperialism, which comes out of a lot of the work that he followed in my Substack about gangster capitalism. It's the next book that I'm about to write, and I've been working on it a lot in terms of understanding of the use of force in the wage-labor relation, in the capital extraction relation, and in foreign relations. So gangster capitalism allows for the extortion of foreign countries to do what we want them to do, blackmail, use of pure force, and finally now we have kidnapping. So we have extortion, kidnapping, blackmail. These are many of the kinds of operations that the Trump administration has been using at home and abroad. My question would be, can we return to a legal liberal framework for the United States to operate under? And I'm very pessimistic about that. I am actually going to delete a lot of apps on my phone before I enter the United States again, because there's a total surveillance system now about any critics of the Trump administration. I'm not a liberal critic of the Trump administration. I am looking at this from a historical materialist point of view. And I would say that the Americans have been operating illegally all around the world really since 1947, which was the declaration of the Cold War, when Truman decided that the Soviet Union was the American deadly enemy. Just in 1945, the Americans had fought alongside the Soviet Union to defeat Nazism. By 1947, all of this had been overturned. And if you see from the early 50s onward, America in Iran deposed a democratically elected leader, General Mossadegh, who was going to nationalize Iranian oil. They installed the puppet leader, the Shah. Well, even before that, you could say that the Americans defended a South Korean war criminal in the war against of the Korean Peninsula, resulting in the division of Korea into the North and the South. That war, the American generals promised, would reduce North Korea to medieval times. There is evidence now, forensic evidence, that what the Americans did in the military bombing campaign of North Korea was destroy every single trace of its infrastructure. North Korea, or Korea, was an electrified nation at that point. By 1953, on satellite imagery of North Korea, there were no lights on. So that kind of genocidal bombing was already happening, and they were fighting China at that time, even though China was very weak, because the Americans were obsessed with something that they start talking about now, the domino theory, where if one country becomes communist or socialist, then other countries will follow suit, and then the whole world will become communist and socialist, and that is the worst possible thing that can happen, which means that you should go into a country and destroy its communist party, its communist insurgency, and they did it in Vietnam. And during the 60s, they were complicit in murdering 1 million Indonesian leftists. So you have Korea, you have Vietnam, you have Indonesia, you have these foreign interference campaigns that resulted in many deaths. So far, Venezuela is actually a fairly contained situation right now, but the sort of disrespect for national sovereignty, the advantage for the United States of having civil wars in which a right-wing fascistic government comes to power is really clear. And maybe the most egregious one example of American interference in another country in order to impose its free market policies is Chile. So September 11th, 1973, Pinochet stages a coup, deposes Salvador Allende, who was a democratically elected socialist leader, hoping to nationalize the economy as well. So there's a lot of precedence for this kind of activity, but the flagrant self-interestedness of Trump's gangsterish personality makes it actually a more honest play. Because in the past, what the Americans said when they went in to try to destroy communists and communist movements with regard to Vietnam, Indonesia, South Korea was, we're saving the people from authoritarianism. So Trump can't really say that now. He's a very authoritarian guy. He's just telling the world that they want to take out of the ground what is very valuable in Venezuela, and that is oil. But there's also another, like behind that reason is yet another reason for the intervention, which is the privatization and the financialization of the Venezuelan economy so that large American conglomerates like Blackwater, BlackRock, well, Blackwater, the security company, probably profit too, will be able to go in and financialize Venezuela's debt, financialize Venezuela's oil production so that it can be sold as futures and derivatives on Wall Street. The example that Matt Huber, a professor of geography, gives of the Iraq War is really interesting. He studies environmental policy, climate change, and he's very much a leftist. And he said, if you look at the American intervention in the Iraq War, Americans didn't really profit that much from oil production. And in fact, if you make available oil reserves from a country like Iraq or Venezuela, it actually lowers the cost of crude oil. And right now, crude oil is very cheap. It's $60 a barrel. And oil's pricing, opening up new oil reserves is not advantageous to oil companies necessarily. The bigger points of profit in Iraq and in Venezuela and in countries like this is their integration into the American banking system and the American financial system. And I would say, like with Iraq's reconstruction profited American companies much more than Iraqi oil did. There's an anti-war movement that is protesting, that's going out on the street. The anti-war movement right now is going to be organized around Democratic Party powers. And people are going into the streets, people are talking about the military expenditure and the illegality of the Trump administration, and they're fomenting a lot of discontent. All of this is going to lead to strengthening of the Democratic Party, because I don't think most Americans want war. And the Americans who voted for Trump wanted an end to international investments and expenditures and a reinvestment in the American core, the Midwest and the Rust Belt, places that are outside of the big cities that are really suffering. This is obviously not what Trump is doing. So there is going to be a lot of opposition to the war. But I'm not really hopeful about how progressive those movements are, because all they will want to do is install another leader from the opposition party, the Democrats, who will continue to prosecute illegal international military interventions. Except that when the Democratic president does it, the Democrats will celebrate, like the capturing of Osama bin Laden. Everyone loved that. They thought, oh, how great, he's caught this really evil guy. This most evil man has been hiding out in Pakistan. SEAL Team 6, or one of the military covert operations Marines, with all of their technology, were able to spot him. They were able to hunt him down. They were able to murder him. Osama bin Laden is a bad guy, but this idea of the U.S. operating judicially to murder people is, something that democratic governments will do as willingly as Republican governments. Now, you could say, okay, Osama bin Laden was a war criminal and we just kill him without trial. There's no trial there. Maduro was actually going to go on trial for intention to traffic in cocaine, for the possession of machine guns. And what they violated in actually capturing Maduro and putting him on trial in the United States is the whole idea of sovereignty and sovereign immunity. We don't recognize him as the legitimate leader of Venezuela. We allege that he stole the election. And under the Treaty of Westphalia from the 19th century, the notion of a nation is a government with integrity that can manage its borders. And I think Venezuela actually fulfilled those requirements, but because Americans judged Maduro as having violated violated American law, Americans believe that they have a right to go in and capture him. Now, there's also the realpolitik idea that it is in America's best interest to capture him. And Trump used to call the Democrats corrupt because they tried to use the law against him to prevent him from running for president. Now Trump is using the law to further American foreign interests in a military way. So American law is basically an instrument and a tool for whoever is powerful to justify their actions. America obviously is baldly claiming to be the empire of the 21st century. And I think one of the things that Trump really resented about liberalism is that it sat upon one of the largest military accumulations in the history of mankind without a willingness to use it with full force. And now he's just saying, we have the power, we have the weapons, we can act this way. These other Democrats who had that power were making the military weak. I like strength. He's a very childish and primitive person, which is what is part of his appeal. And he says, we're strong. We're the strongest nation in the world, and therefore we should be able to act as we want to. And anyone who isn't willing to use the American military in this way is weak. And he called Biden weak, and Obama was weak. And the two terms that he loves to use to praise people and things is they're very strong, they're very smart. And in fact, he has a lot of respect for China because he thinks Xi is actually very strong and very smart. There's not a lot of nuance in the way he measures things, but Rubio is a much more canny, much more intelligent person in a way, and he really wants to restore the power of the right throughout Latin America. His family were right-wing, almost far right-wing Latin Americans. They were elites. There are a lot of people like that in America, far-right exiles from Latin America, and they want to be the rightful rulers of weaker countries in Latin America that they feel rebelled against the rule of the right and of the Catholic Church, and Trump will help him restore the kind of right-wing, almost quasi, military right-wing governments in all of South America. And those right-wing governments will allow free markets and American intervention to, run rampant. And this is in a way like a return to the Cold War, a return to U.S. hegemony, but it is a bald kind of empire building, to use the term viceroy. When you think about the word viceroy, you think about the rulers of India, right? The British rule of India always happened under a viceroy. And the viceroy represented the interests of the British Empire. And the British Empire extended from the British Isles all the way to Hong Kong and through Africa. So viceroy was just an office. It's an office of an empire. Trump was elected on the idea that he would stop foreign interventions. He was elected on the idea of America first. And America first really has to do with this idea that the American government has expended so much money on military intervention, on rebuilding in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in all these failed foreign interventions, and the actual country itself is falling apart on the level of infrastructure, on the level of being able to provide for its people. And a lot of Trump voters actually believed that he was going to be the anti-war president, that he was going to bring back all of that money and reinvest it in the country itself. So what we've seen, however, is that Trump is he's breaking his promises left and right. I mean, there is a right-wing, anti-imperial, anti-war faction in the United States, and that faction was actually very important in the election of Trump himself. If you think about what is happening in terms of American infrastructure, we don't have any high-speed rail in the United States. Public hospitals are being closed left and right. There was a possibility of saying America has invested too much in its foreign affairs. We should start investing in the country itself. And I think a lot of Trump supporters naively believed that he was going to do that. This is the indication that he doesn't care to do that. He wants to show American strength, and that he has been captured by the pro-war factions of the right. The left in Latin America have always been very suspicious of the United States already. People on the right celebrate American free marketeering there. But I think that the one lesson I hope the global South draws from this is that you have to build your own economy and industrial capacity. You can't underestimate the viciousness and the violence of the American empire. I don't understand how Maduro left himself that vulnerable with the American warships off the coast of Venezuela. Like, he should have been not in the presidential palace. Okay, so that's number one. Do not underestimate American capacity for violence and illegal action, and also manage your own countries well and build industrial capacity and manufacturing and extractive multilateral relations in the world, and do it with discipline. Do it with the idea of providing for your people. Do it with the idea of providing for your elite classes. One of the things that they accused the Chavez and Maduro of doing was driving 8 million Venezuelans into exile. One of the things that I think that Venezuelan leftism failed to do was win over the loyalty of its white-collar professionals. So many of the people who left Venezuela were people who made good livings, who had special expertise. Venezuela was a very, very industrially and economically advanced country. And one of the things that Chavez managed better was that industrial capacity. Maduro was much less competent at doing this. But I do think that every country that wants to defend itself from the American empire has to make its commitment to manage its own economy for strength, for manufacturing capacity, for extractive capacity, and not sit around and dream of some kind of return to neo-primitivism that I know is really popular in Latin America too. Like, we're just like going to be tribal people, and we're going to have this like beautiful craft-oriented, primitivism, and we're going to go back to some kind of agricultural communalism. No, that is not the way. You cannot go backward. I mean, if there's any example that China has shown, it's shown that an agricultural society has certain weaknesses in the globalized world that we live in. Global South do not romanticize agricultural modes of production or like native or folk languages or things like that. If you want to enter the world of modernity, you have to strengthen your own economies and protect and provide for your people, number one. And it also means like not fomenting a kind of class war that weakens the public infrastructure of your country. And that's what happened in Venezuela. And I really, we went to Mexico many years ago. I lived, Mexico because we're in California. And there is a part of the Mexican left that really influences the American left, which is like, the only thing I would say is like they're neo-primitivist and kind of anarchistic. And they think like human beings can go up against tanks. No human being can fight a tank. No human being can go up against the weaponry and the power of capital. But collectively, you can build a strong economy, provide for your people, and win their faith in you.
And that brings us to the end of this week's edition of China Now. We've taken you through the latest developments in China currents and shared in-depth perspectives from our Thinkers Forum. Thank you for watching. Please do remember to send in your comments, your thoughts, your feedback and suggestions for the coming episodes of the show through the email provided below. My name is Makiza Latifa, and it's always a pleasure coming your way with China Now. I'll see you same time next week.